No woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Hey, little darling, don't shed no tear. No woman, no cry.
Is marriage for white people? That's the question being asked by an author of a new book. Is marriage for white people? How the African-American marriage decline affects everyone. It's got a lot of people talking right now. Stanford law professor Ralph Richard Banks says it's time for black women to, this is a quote, give up the good fight on marrying a black man. Here he is.
The way I think of that is that women have been asked to carry a great load. Black women shoulder a lot of the burden, in short, of black men's struggles. And I am asking women to put the burden down. Many women think that they're attracted to black men. They are attracted to black men. But attraction itself is complicated. And one of the things that I discovered in the course of writing this book is that there's a whole host of fears and desires and anxieties that animate black women's attraction to black men.
Okay, Banks recently wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal and said that 70% of black women aren't married. That's roughly true. Okay, so is it time for single, educated, and working black women to just forget the notion of marrying a black man and look outside their race? A new Gallup poll shows more and more people are receptive to the idea of interracial marriage. In 1968, the numbers were quite low for whites approving of interracial marriage. This is a Gallup poll from USA Today, but today those numbers skyrocketed for both blacks and whites. So does the author have a point? Is the black marriage nearly obsolete? Is the idea just for white people? Have a black couple here who said,
No woman, no cry.
In that last video, I had a lot to say about the war against men. Because it's such a huge issue, it was impossible to be as in-depth as needed in one video. I mean, that video by itself was too long. But in that video, as I was speaking to men as a whole, there actually needs to be some direct targeting and a message like this. Now listen, it is absolutely true that there is a war against men. Masculinity is in a great decline all across the board, regardless of race, nation, or creed. This goes without saying, and that's why the first video was very general. But in regards to this war against men, there is a group that has historically taken the most damage and has been attacked the most directly. There has been an all-out assault against the black men, especially in America. It has been an unspoken war that has been waged against us for many generations. And as a black man myself, it is something I cannot leave unchecked. Now, as I said in that last video, now, if you haven't watched that video, please watch that first before you watch this, because some things I say here is based on assuming the foundation was already laid from that first video. But again, in that first video, I spoke about these two latest movies that have come out. Women Warriors, proving they are just as strong as men or even stronger. We have Black Panther 2, where the trailer just showed women. If you remember in the first movie, the king was guarded by a female army. We have this other movie about other women warriors, where even in the clip, one of the women shows that she was stronger than a man. We even have the Biden administration silently working against black men in this country without saying an actual word that he's doing it. I mean, look at all of his appointments. He has promoted black women to high offices, and it seems one of the criteria they must have is that they're not married to black men.
Acutely aware that my presence at this podium represents a few firsts. I am a black, gay, immigrant woman.
There have been news articles about why more black women should marry white men. Most of our heroes in the black community, our actors, our singers, our rappers, athletes, social activists, etc., they all have been emasculated or are homosexual. There is no room for the traditional black man in society today. There is an all-out assault on black men that we aren't really able to bring up because people either want to reduce these feelings as either sexist, racist, homophobic, or all of it combined. In that last video, I went over the whole agenda and what us as men should be. But what needs to be done and said here is how we got here specifically in the black community. So I needed to tackle this in a specific video so that anyone that does not understand this can clearly gain more perspective. and our black men can understand that they have been attacked and emasculated in order to be conquered. You are conquered. Every aspect of our current black culture in America has been designed and created to present the world with a subdued black man, and it is very necessary that at this point you understand this. So we're going to talk about it. Let's begin. So let's go back in time so we can better understand where we are today. After slavery was abolished, blacks in America tried to establish lives for themselves. The period of the Great Migration was one of the largest movements of people in the United States history. Approximately 6 million black people moved from the American South to northern, midwestern, and western states roughly from 1910s until the 1970s. To escape racial violence and pursue economic and educational opportunities, black Southerners began to migrate all over the country. The first Great Migration in 1910 to 1940 had black Southerners relocate to northern and midwestern cities, including New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. Now, what's important to understand is that during these times, the black family was statistically strong. The men brought their families around the country, seeking opportunities for themselves so they can support their families. Though they dealt with a great deal of racism and oppression, those that had families held those families intact. According to the United States Census Bureau data, in 1910, black children raised in two-parent households was at 72.5%, and only 13% were raised by mothers only. For contrast, white children raised in two-parent households was almost at 90%, and only 5% of the households were raised by single mothers. There's an obvious gap there, I know, but not as big as the gap that we'll see. If you follow these statistics through time, through the Great Depression and the first Great Migration, the percentages still held up. We are talking about 30 years of strong families raised by both parents, both mom and dad, in the home. So for me, we're going back about 3 generations to my great-grandparents, and for the most part, the black homes and families were still intact. Now, this is where I want you to pay attention. In the 1960s, right before the Civil Rights Act, the percentages started to shift. The homes of black children raised by both parents dropped by 5% to 67.7%, and black children raised by single mothers raised 5% to 18.2%. Now, in white households in the 1960s, their families got stronger. The two-parent household was now above 91%, and still only 5% of households were raised by a single mother. We will go over why, but just stay with these statistics, because over the next 20 years, we will see the biggest shift in the black family. In the 1980s, during the biggest point of inflation in the United States, when we had a major recession, the black family collapsed. The homes of black children raised by both parents dropped by 20% to 47.1%, and black children raised by single mothers raised almost 20% to 37.3%. Now, to gain more understanding and understand that these trends were based on factors outside of the family, particularly economics, just understand that the strong white families also saw a decline. Their two-parent household declined 7% to 84%, and the percentage of households raised by single mothers grew by 6% to 11.7%. So, I give you a lot of numbers, but the picture needed to be painted for you. By the 1980s, the homes in the black community that had single mothers raising them represented almost 40% of the community. In 20 years, 20% of black men were removed from the black households. Now, let me ask you, do you really think it was solely because our parents and grandparents were deadbeats? No, they were attacked. The system that this country was built upon was created to assimilate black people in the country while making sure that black men never gained ground or dominance. The Great Migration was used to assimilate black people around the country, promising opportunities and providing them. By the mid-1960s, half of all blacks had moved into the middle class. But by this time, that progress seemed to be stalling. The rise in black income relative to that of whites was steady throughout the 50s. But after the Civil Rights Act, this relativity was halting fast. The reason for father's absence in the black home ranged from the existence of welfare regulation that forced the father out of the home, a man's inability to secure gainful employment to support his family.
Struggling with a sore throat, the former governor criticized the Carter administration for fighting inflation with unemployment, especially black unemployment.
What are you trying to do for us?
I'm trying to tell you. I am trying to tell you that I know now there is no program or promise that a president can make that the federal government can come in and wave a wand and do this.
There was tensions in the male-female relationship as feminism began to rise, and the fact that a majority of black children were beginning to be born out of wedlock.
Raise your hand if you're married. None of you are married. Raise your hand if you would like to be married to your baby's father. One. The rest of you who don't plan to get married, why don't you plan to get married? I'd like to know that.
You already have your child to think about, and then a whole family to care for. You know, it's a lot of responsibility. And then you don't want the commitments.
I wouldn't want no man holding me down because I think I can make it as a single parent.
But don't you think you might need help in raising that baby from a man?
Not really. I didn't have a father. My father wasn't in the home, so, you know, it really, male figures are not substantially important in the family.
Now that last factor was one of the biggest challenges for black men. In a world that was crippling him, the young black man wanted to prove his manhood by creating a child. But American society denied him the economic resources to support that child. Lack of economic opportunities led to poverty in the black community. You see, where there is poverty and people struggling to survive, it spurs violence and crime. Many black men returned to crime as that was their only opportunity. The movie Dead Presidents depicted as well. When the young brother did his thing in the war and came back to no opportunities, he tried as hard as he could, but he was not able to provide for his family. But a pimp in the neighborhood was able to provide because he wasn't dependent on the system. So that brother Lorenz Tate saw that, and so he decided that he was going to go into crime, and it didn't work out for him. With limited opportunities, black men resorted to crime. And though white-collar crime back then was estimated to cost society over $100 billion a year, compared to the $2.5 billion from street crimes, the prisons were occupied largely by lower-income black Americans. During the 70s, whites were jailed at a rate of 43.5 per 100,000, while blacks were imprisoned 367.5 per 100,000. The sentences of blacks averaged 20% longer than whites. Now check this. During the 1970s, the unemployment rate for blacks increased dramatically, but so did the prison population. There was a direct correlation. Lack of economic opportunities and extreme poverty led black men to desperation and crime. I mean, today, where marijuana is able to be smoked freely all throughout this country, I was in New York and I saw people smoking weed in front of cops. It was crazy. But back then, people's whole lives were being ruined for an ounce of weed. Those laws back then were put in place for a purpose. Of all new employees entering the private industry between 1974 and 1977, 53% were white women, 26% were white men, 5% were black women, and black men experienced no net gain in their numbers, which is why they needed laws like affirmative action. I really can go in deep with all those statistics during that period. I'm just really trying to paint a picture. What happened to the black man in America was not more about the lack of desire of the black man or his laziness, but lack of opportunities and them trying to find a place in a society that did not want them. The system was not created for black men, and at no time did it ever want to see the thriving of black men unless it filled the stereotypes that it desired. Not to mention that if they were in poverty and sought after welfare, the welfare programs would not assist women who had men in the house. These were called man in the house rules, and they sought to enforce social norms about who was morally deserving of welfare. That's how they say it.
We will tighten welfare and give more attention to outside sources of income when determining the amount of welfare an individual is allowed.
Mom, the social worker's here. Honey, get rid of the TV and hide.
Specifically, the rules prevented adult males from residing with mothers and children who received assistance. And so it was more beneficial for a mother to not be married and a man not to live in their home than for a family to be together. Poverty and lack of economic opportunity strongly plagued the black community, specifically with black men. So our black families by the 1980s were more than 50% fatherless. Black men had a high unemployment rate and lack of opportunities. And this was created by the system.
In the black communities of cities like Los Angeles, it's hard to imagine the situation could deteriorate further. The unemployment rate among black adults is double the average and climbing. In many places, desperation has turned to hopelessness.
Now, we by default tend to simply blame the white man for this, but this was much deeper than just blaming white people. Who we were before our ancestors were taken as slaves has been hidden from us. And the hatred and oppression that we went through was told to be solely for the color of our skin. But you must understand it was much deeper than that. This oppression and hatred was very much spiritual, and blaming white people doesn't help you understand what was going on. It only helps keep you trapped in the system's way of thought and trapped in their system. The system was created by Satanists who were strongly against black men who descended from slavery. This bloodline is hated. We were cursed, and by consequence, our people were oppressed. This is too deep to explain in this video, but this was the enemy. It should not be a blanket scapegoat of white people. This doesn't discount the fact that many in the white community were moved through spiritual hatred.
They're very close to the Levittown norm, except in one respect. William Myers Jr. and his family are Negroes in an all-white community.
But the whole trouble with this integration business is that in the end, it probably will end up with mixing socially. And you will have, well, I think their aim is mixed marriages and becoming equal with the whites. We have our home here, and if the colored move in and run real estate values down, there are a lot of us, the GIs particularly, who are going to be more or less stuck with their homes.
The point I'm making is black men were products of their environments and were being emasculated. And they were no longer taking responsibility in dealing with the circumstances, but they became victims of their circumstances. And when men tried to create something outside of the system, this was quickly squashed and suppressed. It was very difficult for the black man during these times, and we cannot point fingers at them. These were highly oppressive and deceptive times. So let's keep going. Now we're in the 80s. And the system is still the enemy. But you know what happened? The system already knew what they were doing, and they decided now they could really recreate the black man. There was no real influence in the black community, in the black homes, and our real heroes were corrupted, whether they were in the church, abandoning the Bible, preaching a social gospel, whether they were in the streets pushing drugs, being paid to destroy their communities from within, where they were already controlled through organizations like Prince Hall Freemasonry and the Black Boule. The government placed guns and crack in our communities and allowed our communities to severely decline. Then from the rise of mass media, the system went into our neighborhoods and picked our enemies and made them our heroes. The birth of gangster rap and hip-hop culture began, and this was something that we really felt like it was our own. But because we didn't understand the system, we didn't know that these heroes that were being presented to us were just tools of the same system that we were against. They used our own people as a Trojan horse to overcome us. Black culture became hip-hop culture, and it created a sense of immaturity in our black men that we have yet to overcome. For black men, everyone that you may have placed as a hero, that you may have placed posters of them on your walls, you watched their videos, adapted to their style, brought their clothes, went to the parties they threw, studied their lyrics, laughed at their jokes, dressed like them, took on their values. said you were going to make dead presidents represent you as well. All of these so-called heroes were and are, in fact, your enemies. They don't care about you. They care about themselves. The reason why they were so easily recruited is because they were already proven to not care. That's why they were selling drugs to their own community. The same way they can sell crack in their own community, destroying our mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, and they felt no way about it, is the same way they feel no way about becoming a famous celebrity, paying millions by destroying their communities through the promotion of debauchery and filth. And guess what? We all ate it up. They were being made rich to destroy our communities from within, and we were cheering it on. Our fathers were no longer in the home, and these men became our role models. It was a geniusly executed sinister plan against us. And most of us men, still in our 40s, still can't shake it off from us. And to add to this, they emasculated these men and made them do ritual homosexual acts. This is a rite of passage in order to be in the system. It's why we have seen all of our prominent men in dresses. I really want to address what's going on. These black men who we made our role models and heroes are complete sellouts, and they damage you and I as black men, and it is our responsibility to protect the next generation. But we have not, and this younger generation is even worse than before. So now we have guys like Lil Nas X giving Satan a lap dance, or Russell Westbrook coming out with a clothing line wearing a dress. It's too much to mention. Black men in America have been conquered, and it's time that you hear it and understand it. You have been overcome and demasculated to a point where our sons no longer know what a man is any longer, and they are completely soft. The women are right now stronger than the men, which is why you are seeing movies about women warriors. The same system you thought you were rebelling against in hip-hop with NWA promoting aggression against the police, this same system that you thought you were rebelling against actually conquered you. And you celebrate the sellouts who they used. Yes, there is an agenda about emasculation. But it is us specifically as black men that this agenda has been targeted at the most, because it was our strength that they could not deal with. So understand what they did, and I will skim through it again briefly. After they gave us an illusion of freedom, they lured us into this system, gave us jobs, and allowed us to get educations, promoted some of their controlled bourgeois Negroes, and placed them as our goals to ascend to. After that program set in our minds, they took away all those same opportunities. They promoted agendas that removed the black men out of the homes, allowing their school system and their entertainment to program and raise up our next generation. They then destroyed the communities from within by planting drugs and guns directly in our communities, and they marked our streets by placing Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in every city, not as a memorial for us, but as a marker for them to know where they are attacking specifically, and so that others know that this is a black neighborhood. I mean, I can go to any city in America, and if I want to find the hood, all I need to do is find the MLK Boulevards. That wasn't by accident. They set up laws that imprisoned more of our men and left the next generation fatherless and angry. They filled that void with homosexual sellouts who promoted a lifestyle and mentality that destroyed us from within, removing our values completely, having us disrespect our women. Pretty much everything that would have been right for us, they promoted the complete opposite, and made these men our heroes and the leaders of our society. And we're still celebrating them today, talking about their money and giving them props and all that other garbage. Now we're totally controlled and manipulated, and we have raised up a next generation of black men that doesn't even know what a black man should look like or be like. We now have men that are submissive to their women and do not leave their homes. Men that are scared to combat evil because they're scared of losing their fake black card. And what we see now is either women or gay black men taking our leadership roles. This is all an agenda that has been used against us, because while they diffused us and made sure we are not a threat to them, they have been provoking and manipulating us to use our energy to bring about the change they desire in this world. Black people in America have an extremely high influence on culture and trends and social justice, but they are just echoing the voice of their puppet masters. And this has started because you, Mr. Black Man, have been neutralized. You have been conquered, that you have been so imprisoned that you believe that the only answer is actually the biggest weapon used against us. Yahushua the Messiah is your only answer, and you reject him. Let me tell you why I made this video. The times ahead that are coming are about to be really bad. And every one of you that are under this mind control are going to be dragged into chaos, and your families will be victims just by consequence. If you do not wake up and understand who you are, why we were oppressed, and what our only answer is, you're going to fall. You must break generational curses that the men in your family have been plagued with and defeated by. You must do it. Don't worry about your dad or the other weak men around you. You must wake up and become what this world needs, what our women need, what our children need, what our community needs, and what our Creator, the Most High, requires. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. And I read that scripture because it's time for you to put away the childish things and the childish thoughts. You, as a black man, are being attacked, and there's not much you and I can do to change this trajectory. But we can make up for our mistakes and the mistakes of our parents and our grandparents, and so on. You must be a man who lives out life through strength and not through weakness. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Let all that you do be done with love. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 and 14. Now let me tell you what I know. I imagine that many of you just probably said, man, he was doing good until he brought that religion stuff in. I mean, he's using the Bible. He's controlled. Let me tell you very clearly, I'm not one of these sellout pastors. If you understood what it was I was saying before I quoted a little scripture, humble yourself and then ask yourself, maybe there's something he knows deeper than what I know from the surface. Because here's some truth unedited for you. If you have a problem with the Bible, you have an identity problem, and you don't know who you are. You are mind controlled and need to be woken up. This is Truth Unedited, and I'm not sugarcoating anything for you because we simply don't have the time any longer. It's time for you to walk upright and be who Yah created us to be. You have been led by the ungodly, and like the prodigal son did, you need to come back home and submit to Yah. I want you to know and remember this. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of Yahuwah, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the shaft with which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For Yahuwah knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. That's Psalm chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. Within these last two videos, I put a lot out there, and there was so much more to say actually. But the things that needed to be said, Yah willing, I hope they were given and received by who it was intended for. Listen, I love you all, and I have only made this because I care for you. I care for your family, and I care for our community. I cannot watch any more of this provocation against us and not speak up on it. These movies really provoke me. And my own friends, they see all this, but they still dance around the answer and the solutions. These things needed to be said, and I hope that this resonated with you. And if you're already woken up and living as a true man of Yah, please share this with those you may know have fallen short. It is time to put the childish, false ways behind you and come to Yah in fullness of heart and spirit. Be a man worthy of respect and of honor, and please lead whoever Yah places in your path. You have been called, and the only question is, will you answer? Please say yes, and be ready. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, Thanks again, everyone, for watching. Again, this message is a part 2, and it's just some things I had to say. If you have not listened to the first message, please make sure that you do. I thank you for listening, and I thank you for your support. I love you all.